Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are tuned into Love and Love Podcast. This is your girl, Sasha, and I'm bringing you the sauce. All right, we are here on episode 6. I'm so glad that you have stuck with us on this journey. Today we're going to be diving into some tough issues. We have with us here Phillip Lewis, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to introduce himself before we get into the sauce.
Hello, thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it. Phillip Lewis, working downtown DC, 16th and K, a small private practice, about 3 clinicians. We form Lewis and Associates, and you can find more about us at lewiscounseling.org.
Awesome. So, Phillip is a clinical social worker and board certified psychotherapist. And he's going to be helping us today navigate our topic. And today's topic, we're going to be covering what is your attachment style? And could it be the reason for your failed relationships? So we are going to get into the sauce. We have some amazing points. I'm going to ask Phillip to go through what is an attachment style? Because this is something like fairly new as far as is it fairly new as far as theory?
It, the theory has been around for a bit, and I kind of like to explain it in kind of 2 ways. So, our attachment style, we obtain that by how we enter the world, basically, from birth, our childhood experiences, what we learn and see and observe through the stages of development, and then how we show up in the world in adulthood later on. So that's how I kind of like to describe it. But the concept itself has been around for a bit.
Wow. So you mean to tell me that something that occurred from birth could affect me today in my adult relationships?
Definitely, definitely. Our experiences, if we only learn to love a certain way or see what love looks like or comes like from others, we grow up expecting that or trying to interact or recreate it elsewhere in different ways. So it may
Wow.
not always be the reason for relationship breakdown, but it definitely contributes at times.
Wow. Okay, so what are these attachment styles?
Sure. So the primary attachment styles are secure attachment, anxious, disorganized, and avoidant. So when we start with secure attachment, these are folks who came into the world with the understanding that their needs will be met or can be met. So as a child, we grow up and we cry, we're fed, or we need to be held or coddled. Mom and dad does it right away.
Right.
Our first day of school, whenever we look over our shoulder, someone is there to support us in our interactions, in our interpersonal relationships, family dynamics. We always learn that there will be support there if we work on it, and finding comfort in others, being a comfort for other folks is not as detrimental and can actually be a way of growing and thriving. So the way that we show up in the world when we have this understanding growing up is that we find comfort in close relationships, but we still can be independent. We actively seek emotional support because we know it's better for our growth. We value intimacy and closeness, but still have a strong sense of individuality. And we have positive thoughts about other folks, about ourselves, about intimacy. And we know that love is there. We know what it looks like. And we aren't afraid to go out and find it or create it or practice it or teach it in all forms.
Okay.
So when we move on to the anxious attachment type, we generally come into the world with the understanding that love is out there, but we never know when it's coming.
Mm.
So we grow up and yes, mom feeds us when we cry, or we are held by or encouraged by dad when needed. But because of life situations or certain stressors, maybe having a lot of kids and the passing in the family or being overworked and underpaid, life just didn't allow everyone to show up for us as consistently as needed. So we
Okay.
knew love was out there. We just never knew when it was coming.
Mm.
So this could be a parent with a number of kids, single housing, just the social constructs usually impacts our understanding of when we might get love.
Okay.
So when we show up in the world, we show up as the lover and the fighter, right? We we give and go above and beyond for others. We tend to consider ourselves to be the lover in the relationship or love more than the one the partner that we're sharing our life with. We can love intensely and with intention. We believe in strong relationships, but we don't know how to create a boundary or a way to express what we need. So we get uncomfortable when someone wants to meet our needs or someone or and we get uncomfortable when we're trying to express what we need because we're afraid of the loss. So we kind of root our understanding of ourselves by how much we can accomplish or how much we can give to others. And because of this, it builds a kind of anxiety provoking state
Right.
where we're always constantly thinking someone might be cheating or they'll eventually fall out of love with us because we aren't good enough. It's the self deprecating thought, things that would lead us to think that it's all too overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, folks who show up with a anxious type of attachment style usually cannot comprehend or wouldn't allow themselves to think that there's instability in a relationship. So oftentimes they have blinders on to what's going on, and then we end up feeling like we don't know what happened, or how did we lose this person, or how did we never see that there was a problem in the first place.
Okay.
um, they usually have a negative or weak sense of self, and this fuels the anxiety. And the only way that we know how to control or manage that anxiety is by making others happy, by doing or contributing efforts to kind of decrease the worry, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we have the disorganized attachment style. And with this, we would enter the world with an understanding, or we come into the world with the understanding that there's warmth and love, and we have can explore and enjoy all of its experiences. And then tragically, something happens that takes that all away. Or maybe we have been a part of relationships or experienced relationships where there has been love, but there's been a lot of heartbreak, or there has been some trauma, or there has been some pain that comes from, or is the result of, or you have to go through pain in order to get that love.
Mm-hmm.
So these folks, or we, excuse me, present in the world seemingly unable to have positive relationships. We're always in chaos. We're always disorganized. We don't
Mm.
know what's going on in the world when there's opportunity for us to react or interact with someone. We tend to be extremely close and sometimes dismissive or passive, and are really hard to regulate our emotions or figure out what we really want or need. So think of it as this way. We know that love's across the street, right?
Right.
And we have to cross this busy street to get to it, but we feel like we're crossing the street with our eyes closed. We know there's a car coming. We know that we might be in fear or in danger. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we either run across or we just stay there, or, whatever your body does or whatever your emotions does to protect itself for self-preservation.
Right.
That's generally what would spin someone into a cycle. And when they're excuse me, when they are disorganized or have unresolved anxiety and attachments.
Okay.
When we get to avoidant or dismissive persons, they
Mm-hmm.
usually come into the world and they're usually feeling alone. There's no love out there. There's no point to it. And they've never had it. They never experienced it, don't understand it, or they say it's unnecessary. Generally, this is coming into a world where there wasn't much support, or maybe we're in a family where attaining or achieving something is more important than showing emotion, or maybe just culturally hugs and being supportive, connected, or supported, connected emotionally wasn't really understood or taught. We never saw it anyway. So we show up in the world extremely independent and say that we're strong and that we know how to teach others to be strong and we can be strong for others, but no one needs to be strong for us. We're really anxious about someone wanting to see our weaknesses or be there or be around when necessary. So we're okay with being the rock, but we'll never allow a space for our own healing or for our own emotions to be shown. They can be considered a lone wolf or self-sufficient,
Mm-hmm.
and generally present as having high self-esteem with a positive view of ourselves and don't believe that we need a relationship in order to feel complete. We'll
Mm-hmm.
always show up for others, but we'll never allow anyone to show up for ourselves. And we genuinely avoid emotional closeness, hide our feelings, and can sometimes be emotionally dense. Now, none of these situations are set in stone. And of
Right.
course, these examples are just ways to help elaborate and bring an understanding about the four different ways of attachment theory,
Right.
or how they might fit into our life. So
Right.
these examples and these experiences are just some thoughts to reflect on. It's definitely not what you would be. One person can be one or more, or move
Right.
from each category throughout their lifetime, depending on how much work and effort they put in. So hopefully, it's just been a helpful guideline to understand and to reference for some possible self reflection.
Yeah. So I think that is very interesting, right? Because we all know people, right? Or we do it ourselves, or we fit into one of these categories, right? And it kind of dictates how we operate in relationships, and not just romantic relationships, right? It's how we relate
Right?
to others, right?
Definitely, definitely. Friends, coworkers, all of it.
Oh, so this is really deep, y'all. Like this is amazing. Um, just it's funny how the science of the mind works, right? Because there's so many things that go back to who we are at our core. And I feel like in order to evolve, you really have to understand who you are at your core,
Definitely.
to move away from that. So what you're saying, that someone with an anxious attachment style, right?
Mhm.
How can they establish safety and security within themselves, to avoid any negative impacts in uh, to their relationship?
Gotcha. Well, the first thing I'm thinking is identify what is the anxiety provoker. Is it being left alone? Is it someone not contacting me in a certain amount of time? Is it the thought that I will not be enough? And once you can pinpoint that down, that's when you can start to work on it. So the first part of your development, if you find yourself in this stage, we'll
Mm-hmm.
kind of be journaling or just writing down when I am the most anxious or when I feel the most in need, this thing is happening, or I'm
Right.
experiencing or picking up this from other people. Then you try and find ways to affirm yourself or build a strong sense of self. So, whatever those negative automatic thoughts that are attached to those experiences that you've identified,
Right.
simply tell yourself the opposite or write down the opposite or try to find that in yourself or other people to help hold you accountable to contradict those negative thoughts. Um, Generally, self-image is something that needs to be worked on if we find ourselves in the anxious attachment type.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that will help you to have a better love of self, love of how you operate in the world, how you present yourself to be in the world,
Right.
is detrimentally important. And finally, this may sound crazy and it
Mm-hmm.
may be painful,
Right.
but sometimes when we go back and we explore what happened, or we look over our lifetime and wonder about where we first picked up this habit, where
Mm-hmm.
we first thought there was a need to be affirmed by someone else,
Right.
and explore that pain and go back to that pain over and over again. So sometimes maybe going back to the root of it will cause it to let hurt less each time. It's just like a roller coaster. We get on a roller coaster and we're really afraid the first time.
Right.
But by the 20th time, you've learned all the twists and turns. It's kind of boring, and it's no longer an anxiety provoking
Right.
experience. So, yeah.
Now, I want to know, because in exploring that, can't because I believe that in my journey I have struggled with anxiety, and I think I mentioned that in um episode 5. That was, see, like we're on 6 already. Like, come on, that's crazy, right? Um,
Congrats.
yeah, thank you. And so I think I talked about that a little bit because I believe that I didn't know exactly what it was, but I identified that it was anxiety, and that was something that I needed to address. And,
Mhm.
because I would get um, just serious panic attacks if I had reached out to, especially I was, just, in that dating process. I would question every single thought. There'll be a million and one things that could have possibly happened, and none of them good. And I really had to get through that. And how I got through that was therapy.
Mhm.
And so, in saying that, I want to just propose to you as to, do you see patients for issues such as anxiety like this?
Definitely, yes. And anxiety presents in a number of ways. So it doesn't always have to be a panic attack or an anxiety attack.
Right.
It can be sleep issues. It could be constant ruminating thoughts. It can be always feeling on edge, or maybe when we're around certain people or going through certain experiences, our heart rate goes up and or our body temperature raises. Or sometimes we just feel so overwhelmed we get exhausted really quickly and have to sleep and crash for a while.
Right.
So, identifying however the symptoms may present, starting there is a big thing, and it's something that I definitely walk through with clients in therapy and through a number of ways, like exposure or trauma processing, if it is traumatic related, cognitive behavioral therapy, all types of techniques. So it is something we definitely practice and we definitely get into. Yep.
That's so awesome. So I want you guys to make sure that you get Mr. Lewis's contact information at the end of this podcast. Is also going to be posted in our description section below, on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you are reaching out and contacting him, because I could tell you right now from experience, this was not something I was able to manage on my own. It was very difficult, and it caused a lot of stress, and in my life, on every angle, in my relationship with my son, in my relationship, at work. It was a sense of a relief, and operating outside of that anxiety has been such an improvement on my mental health. So moving on, though, on the issue of an avoidant, either the fearful avoidant or the dismissive avoidant attachment, what are some of the ways that someone with these attachment style can develop an interdependent relationship while minimizing their stress? Because you mentioned before that these individuals tend to um, be independent and loners, but we all know that, to be in a relationship, you have to develop some sort of interdependence, right? And reliant, allow other people into your space. So how can they do that with while minimizing their stress?
Right. So this the I generally like to say practice makes perfect, even in relationships. I mean, so if we think that stress will come from interacting with those, start with something light. Start with find a relationship that is not as stressful. And if it's really as simple as going to something and having, or someone, excuse me, and having a superficial form of a relationship, knowing that you're going to practice going deeper and building a deeper connection, will help. So if it's just having a gym buddy, or I mean, and this is friends, not always intimate relationships,
Right.
or building, establishing a relationship with a mentor, or reaching out to a family member that you generally don't talk to just for holidays, and then exploring ways to figure out how you can navigate that relationship while keep your boundary of whatever you see is stressful. And the more you practice at it, the easier it will begin to become. But you also have to understand and allow yourself to explore the human condition at the same time. So a lot of times these folks like to, or we like to hold back our emotions, or keep them in a box, or never expose them. But if we start to think that emotions and emotional intelligence is a tool, right? We can use our anxiety, we can use depression, we can use anger to get to something, get away from something, or to better our lives. So anxiety usually helps us to understand that there might be danger, or that we need to steer away from something. When we can control the anxiety instead of having it control us, we know what not to go to. We know what will make sure we are safe, right?
Right.
Depression tells us what experiences that we should steer away from, what we don't like from others. It helps us to reflect and look back at what road we shouldn't go down anymore. Anger sometimes allows us to understand or communicate that our needs aren't being met. So if we control our anger in a positive way, to now be more assertive and say that, hey, you're not showing up for me in this way, as opposed to allowing the anger to control you and take a relationship or your emotion another way, will kind of stunt your growth and your development as well. So really thinking of your range of emotions, and experiencing each of them as crazy as it sounds, as an enjoyable thing, because you will get these will be tools that you can use to just have a better life. Your
Mm.
emotions are tools. You can yield them at your disposal. You can use them as you see fit to get whatever you want. And that would be the advice I'd give.
So, I wanted to explore this idea of like just interaction, right? Because we're all different individuals, right? So, can someone that is, say, anxious date another person that's anxious, and the same for like an avoidant with an anxious person, or avoidant with an avoidant?
It really depends on communication and boundaries. So, one person who's anxious may be in a relationship with another anxious type attachment, and it works out. Why? Because we both want to cling. We
Right.
both want to meet the needs. We both want to make sure no one's leaving. So we're not going to do it to the other person. But it can also be overwhelming. And that's where you sometimes get the relationships that are too toxic, right? Because we need to love and show love in a certain way. And if you don't allow me to, I'm going to hurt you. Not because I want to, but I don't know what else to do when I'm not allowed to express my love in a certain way. So you can date within, or you can, but moving up and down the spectrum, or exploring all of these options, is just making sure that you express what where you think you are, where you think your partner is, and you talk about what your needs are and how you can meet them. Or if you can't, if the cards aren't on the table or they can't be played, then what would be appropriate for you guys to both move on your journey, and still find that happiness and that love that you need.
Awesome, awesome, good stuff. So in exploring communications, right? What are ways to develop strong, like healthy communication, whether you be like an insecure or secure, anxious
Hmm.
or avoidant?
Hmm.
Um, what are ways to develop healthy communications for each of those? Because I know
Right.
for me, um, I'm considered a secure, anxious.
Hmm.
On that scale, I took a test, y'all.
Hmm.
So I'm considered a secure, anxious
Okay.
person, and my anxiety comes out in depending on the interaction, but I could tend, because I'm secure, I could navigate that space. But I do know I haven't always been there, which is
Hmm.
another thing, right? Because you've identified to be say, for example, a insecure, anxious um, attachment style, right, does not mean that you have to stay there. It is who you,
Right.
right?
Not at all. Right.
We evolve, right? Um,
Exactly.
and so, but I do remember that being in that space, I really had, I tend to yell a lot in communicating, and it was just not very effective at all. So, what are ways that someone with either any of these attachment style can communicate
Right.
effectively?
I hate to sound cliche, but trust is the foundation, right? So
Right.
if we are in this relationship and we're both going to make the conscious decision to try and work on it, then we need to say that we're going to trust each other no matter what comes out. And even if something comes out and we find out later down the road we can't deal with this, or it can't be reconciled for our way of living, then it's okay. I can still love you and move on with my journey, right? And we
Right.
don't have to hurt each other in the process. So
Right.
having that conversation and say we're going to rip off these band-aids and we might accidentally hurt each other, but as long as we don't intentionally try to, we can still find a place of forgiveness.
Right.
Then being honest about your experiences, what happened in life, what you think may be related to how you present or how you show up, right? From how you came into the world. And verbalize if it's your fear of abandonment. Don't be ashamed to say it. If you think that someone will leave you or you're not good enough, express that.
Mm.
If a lot of times our source is our fear, right? So if we want the source of love, we're afraid to say and name it and get it from that person. So a lot of times we're in a relationship where that person will meet all of our needs and we'll live happily. We'll live with joy and all of the things you described. Great love, right?
Right.
Great black love, if I can be, not politically correct.
Right.
But
Right.
if we have that and we're afraid to ask for it, we could potentially lose it because we're thinking that we're going to lose something because I might be too much or I'm going to push them away if I ask for this thing specifically. But
Right.
your end result will still be the same. Whether you ask and we find out that we can't get it, or we ask and we push them away through anger or being upset or reacting to not getting what we need,
Right.
the only sure thing is it'll always end, right? If we
Right.
do that. The only thing we really know is true is if we try, the answer will always be no unless we ask.
Right.
So that's what I would say would be the most important.
That is just so powerful, because I have had conversations and I know myself I was very fearful to communicate what I was thinking. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
scared. I'm not gonna, and, as a woman, not going to ask these questions or I'm not gonna say these things that I'm feeling because I don't want to sound like I'm crazy, right?
Right. Mhm.
But so that's
Somebody
really
might
good,
love you crazy.
right?
And and you'll never find out if we never figure.
Right,
So
right,
yeah.
right. So that's a really good tip. Just kind of be honest and developing that trust. That's really awesome. Now, um, this is good to know. Like if you're married or in a relationship, these are powerful tips. And like takeaways. Now, for those who are in the dating process, right?
Mhm.
Because I could see this being played out in so many ways as you're dating, right? Because if you're
Mhm.
dating someone that is an avoidant and or say male and female or like male and male, what floats your boat. Um and that person is anxious on one side and avoidant on the other, right? Or two avoidance. So, he's over there saying, I'm not gonna call, I don't really need to call, or she's over there, I'm not gonna call because I don't need to
Mhm.
call, right? Or one person that's anxious saying, oh my God, it's been like 24 hours and he hasn't called me after our date. What are tips that you have for someone that is dating with these attachment styles?
Gotcha. The first thing is love yourself through the process.
Mm.
At sometimes you're going to say some negative things about yourself because of the fear or because of the avoidance or whatever. And
Right.
sometimes you're going to experience some negative from another person. But through it, know and trust that you will develop, and the hard work you put in will lead to something better. So loving yourself continually through whatever road you're at or whatever interaction you're having is the key. Then the second would be honoring your emotions. If you're feeling a certain type of way, it's okay. Don't discount it. Don't tell yourself that it doesn't make sense. I always like to tell those that I'm working with that logic and emotion often do not match. Things on paper can be so well put together, all the T's crossed and the I's dotted,
Right.
but it makes no sense to our feeling, right? To our
Right.
emotion. We can see something, we can understand it, and the math is correct, but we still feel a whole nother way. Our parents can tell us they love us, they love us, they love us, but we get dropped off at boarding school and we feel abandoned. Nobody wants us, right? No one ever
Right.
said it, but that's what we feel. So honoring your feelings and not discounting them or discounting your partners, wherever they may be in these four, categories,
Right. Right.
learning to affirm them and learning to give weight to what you're experiencing while still not discounting anything someone is expressing or trying to cut that off.
Right.
And I would say the biggest thing, of course, love yourself is pretty big, but the next thing is don't feel like you have to justify your existence or feel like you have to justify your needs to anyone else. So if you're asking for a specific thing and I've laid the foundation clearly, now I haven't danced around the bush, I haven't given you or given implied certain things, but I specifically told you that I received love this way and
Right.
I need you to do one, two, and three.
Right.
If they don't do that, you don't have to justify why you aren't getting it or say I'm too broken or maybe this is why this or whatnot. If that's where you are now, you being down on yourself and them being down on yourself is not going to do any good.
Right.
So love yourself enough or to not have to justify or validate whatever you're feeling or you're wanting from another person, and do the same for whoever you're choosing to spend your life with as well.
That is so awesome. That's so awesome. Like, just trust yourself, trust the process, and,
Right.
be secure to and confident in knowing what you're asking for is justified within yourself. That's awesome. And I wanted to take this time to let everyone know that even though we're talking about I'm gonna throw my quotes, grown up issues, right? Relationship issues. Um, uh, Mr. Lewis actually sees children, right? And in addition to
Yep, I
adults,
do. Yes, yes, I do.
right?
Children, families, and adults.
And these attachment styles, can help children navigate their emotions as well, right?
Definitely, definitely.
So,
Especially if we start out early on.
right, right, right. I know. Before you go into the adult dating mess,
Right.
before your love life is a wreck. All right, let's fix it before. But this was so amazing. Great talk. I truly appreciate you coming on and sharing this
Thanks for having
wealth
me.
of information with our listeners. And so again, and before I let him go, y'all, I want to let you guys know that he's not only a therapist, but he's also an attorney. We literally have a love and loss symbol,
Yes.
example here. He can navigate us through both spaces, and that's pretty awesome. So I would let you let the our listeners know exactly where they could reach you again.
Sure, sure. We're downtown at 16th and K, and you can get more information from lewiscounseling.org.
Okay, awesome. And again, I'm going to post it in our description section. But for those of you that are listening on whether on Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, um, just go to lewis.org and
Lewiscounseling.org. Yeah.
lewiscounseling.org.
All
Uh,
good. There
yes.
you go.
and make sure that you book your appointment, because these are things that this is an issue that could definitely help you grow as individuals. So we appreciate this conversation, and we look forward to having you guys here with us next week. So until then, yes, that concludes another amazing episode. I am so happy that you have stuck out with me on this journey, and I look forward to being here next week in the same space with you, sharing great energy and elevating our vibrations. And so until next week, I want you to have an incredible week. Stay true to yourself, and remember, the more you pour into you, the more you'll have to pour into others.